The clang of a metal tray hits the floor, sharp and piercing. Glass shatters, and the sound spreads across the cafe like a breath held too long. Every gaze turns toward the counter. A waitress stands frozen, her hands trembling, breath broken into pieces. On the floor, coffee spreads like an open wound. No one speaks, only the slow roll of metal fading, until it touches a table leg and sings its last note. And then, 3 words appear. 3 small words, enough to shake an empire. People deserve better. No one knew what those words meant, not yet. A man sitting in the corner lifts his head. An old baseball cap hides half his face. No one knows who he is, not yet. But that moment is when the truth he's been avoiding finally begins. Ethan Cole, founder of Hart Hearth Coffee, owner of 43 cafés across 3 states, once praised as the symbol of compassion in business. But this morning, he's no longer a CEO. He's just a stranger sitting inside his own cafe, and for the first time, truly seeing it. He watches the coffee bleed across the tiles. He sees the waitress kneel, picking up shards of glass with her bare hands. And he wonders, in the race to build an empire, did he drop the very thing that gave it a soul? It started with a single spill, and 3 words that broke an empire. But for Ethan Cole, they were also the first 3 words that saved it. He once led a coffee empire that stretched across 3 states. His name was Ethan Cole, the man who turned a small garage dream into a brand with a slogan etched on millions of cups, serving humanity with heart. But sometimes, the most beautiful slogans become the emptiest mirrors. Ethan stepped out of a polished black car. The pale morning light reflected on a face once familiar with flashes and grand halls. No press, no employees greeted him, only dust and the truth of an ordinary day. Beneath the wrinkled jacket was a body tired from meetings, and a heart wondering if his own words still meant anything. His company had once been a symbol of compassion, but recent scandals made everything feel fragile. Internal leaks, customers complaining about cold service, employees quitting without a word. Reports still looked perfect, but the light in people's eyes had gone out. Ethan no longer felt the warmth of the brand he had built. Each time he saw the words "serving humanity with heart" on a sign, he saw a lie staring back. The night before, he sat in his top-floor office, surrounded by stacks of documents, reports, and unread emails. A cup of coffee gone cold. An envelope without a name lay in the center of the desk. He opened it, reading each shaky line slowly. People deserve better. Just 3 words. No signature. No accusation, only truth stripped bare. A truth that refused to let him sleep. He read that note again and again until the ink felt carved into his memory. Someone among his thousands of employees had been hurt enough to write it. A small, fragile voice, louder than every report he had ever heard in a boardroom. And that night, Ethan decided to do something he had never dared before. To become invisible. He wanted to know who wrote that letter, or at least understand why someone had to wrap their despair inside an envelope. Not as a CEO, but as a man trying to see where he went wrong. He looked at himself in the mirror before leaving. The reflection no longer looked like the man once printed in Forbes. Messy hair, unshaven face, dark circles under eyes that no longer trusted themselves. He whispered to himself, "Maybe this is the first time I've looked human." In his mind, his mother's voice echoed from long ago. "Son, always see the person, not the profit." He remembered her standing behind the old coffee counter, hands marked with burns but her smile still gentle. She believed every cup of coffee wasn't just a drink, but a question of care, a touch of kindness. Ethan once believed that too, until he forgot how to look into the eyes of his own people. Now, standing before the first cafe he ever opened, he took a deep breath, pulled his cap low, and felt his heart race like the day he first began. A gray morning, no cameras, no nameplate, only wind and the faint scent of coffee in the air. Everything was quiet, only footsteps and the soft hiss of steam inside. Ethan walked in, a stranger returning to an old home. He didn't know that within minutes, 3 small words would change the way he saw the world and make him trade image, reputation, and pride to save something far more precious. Human hearts. The glass door trembled softly as Ethan pushed it open. A wave of warm air drifted out, carrying the scent of burnt coffee and muffled voices beneath a fading melody. That sound had once been the anthem of success. Now it echoed like a distant memory from a world he had left too long ago. He stood still for a moment. No one noticed. No one recognized the man who once appeared on business magazine covers. Only pale light through misted glass, reflecting on wooden floors worn smooth by thousands of footsteps. The air smelled heavy, over-roasted. The smell of grinders that needed cleaning, the scent of hurry. He frowned slightly. He used to teach his staff that the fragrance of coffee should be as light as a morning greeting, never as thick as smoke. Now, that greeting was gone. A few customers sat scattered around. A group of students giggled by the window. A middle-aged man read a paper, his coffee long, cold. An old woman waited for someone who wasn't coming. The whole room breathed a slow, ordinary sadness. Amid that muted hum, Ethan saw her. Mara Martinez, a 38-year-old woman with dark brown hair tied neatly back, a faded black uniform, and dusty white shoes. Her eyes were calm, like a river after a storm. Tired, but kind. She moved between tables with practiced rhythm, not young, but steady. Every motion carried the tempo of someone who had done this too long, like a song memorized without the sheet. She smiled when thanked, bowed when scolded, and never left an empty cup waiting too long. Ethan watched every step she took. Part of him admired her skill, another part ached quietly. She didn't look at anyone for too long. No one truly looked at her either. Both sides drifting past each other, equally tired. He chose a corner seat near the wall, where he could watch unseen. Above him hung an old poster, the slogan faded, "Serving humanity with heart." The ink was peeling, the paper yellowed. He looked at it, then at her. A quiet distance between old belief and present reality. Mara approached his table, notepad in hand, her voice soft but steady. "Good morning. What would you like today?" Warm voice, but weary. Like someone still trying to be kind when there's nothing left to give. "Just a black coffee." "All right, 1 black coffee." She wrote quickly, asking no more. Ethan noticed her hands, fingertips marked with old burns, nails cut short, trembling slightly as she wrote. He wondered how many times she'd burned herself rushing to serve someone, and whether anyone ever asked if it hurt. She turned to the counter, pressed the machine button, steam hissing as light caught the skin along her wrist. For a brief moment, he saw her lower her head, as if whispering something to herself. Then, softly, like a breath dissolving into the noise of the machine, she spoke. "People deserve better." 3 words. Lighter than air, heavier than memory. He flinched. The cup in his hand nearly slipped. His heart pounded, as if hearing a verdict written for him alone. She didn't look at him. She just kept working, her eyes drifting toward the old poster behind the counter. The morning light slanted across it, dust resting gently over the word heart. She looked at it a moment longer, then turned away. Everything seemed to stop. That instant cut deeper than any boardroom criticism he had ever faced. Because, he knew, she wasn't speaking to anyone. She was speaking to herself. And by accident, speaking for hundreds of tired souls inside the empire he had built. He sipped the coffee, bitter and sharp. Not because of taste, but because he finally recognized the real flavor of his brand. Something once warm, replaced by machinery and metrics. Mara passed by again, carrying a tray to the next table. She bent to pick up a fallen spoon, then smiled softly at a little girl beside her mother. That smile was real, though tired, and Ethan felt a weight press down in his chest, because it was clear now, she, not he, was the one keeping the heart of serving humanity with heart. Mara kept moving, her eyes flicking once more toward the poster. Then she turned away quickly, as if avoiding an old belief she no longer trusted. Something cracked quietly inside him. What had once been solid began to dissolve. He set the cup down, eyes following her across the café, and inside, a question rose, quiet as confession. If people like her no longer believe in those words, what does this brand even exist for? Outside, a cold wind slipped through the door, carrying the scent of burnt coffee into the street. Ethan sat still, listening to the clink of spoons, Mara's voice greeting guests, and the door opening and closing. Those three words kept echoing. People deserve better. He didn't yet know what he would do with them. Only that from that moment on, he was no longer the same man. Ethan sat quietly in the corner, the brim of his cap hiding half his face. The noise of the outside world was gone. Only the small rhythm of life inside this cafe remained. Every sound, every movement, pulled him back toward a part of himself he had once abandoned. Behind the counter, a young barista named Tom worked while humming softly. His voice was thin, but clear as a new morning. His hands turned cups, frothed milk, wiped the counter, every motion flowing like breath. Around his left wrist, a worn leather band, perhaps a gift from someone once dear. When he smiled, the whole room seemed a little brighter. Ethan remembered the days he used to smile like that, when all he had was faith and an old coffee machine as his companion. By the window sat Betty, a silver-haired woman, small frame, her hands slow but steady. She wiped each table, straightened the crooked chairs, then paused beside an old man sitting alone. "Would you like some more sugar?" "Just a little, dear." Both smiled, a soft, genuine smile, enough to fill the silence of years spent alone. Ethan watched, feeling as if he were seeing a silent film where every frame meant something. No titles, no KPIs, only ordinary people doing the most extraordinary thing. Keeping kindness alive in a world too busy to remember it once existed. The door opened, and a middle-aged man walked in, his voice harsh. "My coffee's cold. What kind of place is this?" The air went heavy. Tom started to step forward, but Mara gently touched his shoulder and whispered, "I'll take care of it." She walked toward the table, calm, unafraid. "I'm so sorry, sir. The machine's been slow today. Let me replace it for you." "Do you know how much of my time you've wasted?" "Just a few minutes, and you'll have the coffee you were hoping for." She smiled, her gaze steady and kind. The man sighed and sat back down. When the new cup was placed before him, Mara bowed her head slightly. "Thank you for your patience." 5 words, and the anger melted away. Ethan watched her every movement, guilt tightening inside his chest. How many times had he told his staff to be more efficient, forgetting that patience itself was a form of professionalism? He once told his executives that time was money. Now he saw it clearly. Some things cost far more than money. Like the calm it takes to face another person. Tom went back to work, glancing at Mara with quiet admiration. Betty came closer and whispered, "She has a way of calming even the angriest hearts." Ethan swallowed hard. These people, he had never remembered their names on any HR sheet. Yet they were the ones protecting the soul of his company, every day, every hour. A few moments later, Mara returned to his table. In her hand was a dull silver coffee pot, its lid scratched and worn. "Would you like a little more?" Her voice was light as the breeze. Ethan nodded. She poured slowly, carefully. Light from the door fell across her face. The light stayed still. A face both beautiful and sad, marked by years of endurance without complaint. The cup filled nearly to the brim, steam curling upward in a thin ribbon. He looked at her, and in that instant, every ad, every campaign, every revenue number lost its meaning. She was doing exactly what he once promised the world, serving humanity with heart. The only difference was, he had forgotten how. She set the pot down and smiled. "Refills free today. It's cold outside." Ethan blinked, surprised. "You're not afraid they'll dock your pay?" She shook her head gently. A little coffee doesn't cost much if it makes someone feel warmer. A sentence soft as breath, yet it struck him with the weight of shame. He once thought warmer meant rising sales, wider reach, stronger brand. But to her, it meant a hot cup that kept a stranger from feeling alone. Light brushed her cheek, catching a small bead of sweat sliding down. That glint pierced straight into his heart. Ethan wanted to say something, but his throat was dry. Only the sound of the espresso machine lingered, breathing softly like a heart long forgotten. He wondered, how many people like her still worked across his 43 stores? How many hands were holding the values he once promised to protect? And how many hearts were tired, still trying to believe the company had a soul left? Mara walked away, carrying the empty pot. The light faded, leaving only Tom's laughter and Betty's quiet talk with the old regular. Ethan sat there, feeling smaller than he ever had. The people he once called human resources now stood like pillars of a home he had abandoned. The coffee in his cup cooled slowly, but something inside him began to burn. A slow, painful, honest awakening that every profit in his life had been built on unrecorded kindness and the sacrifices of those never mentioned in reports. He bowed his head, breathing deeply. The smell of burnt coffee still there, now mixed with the taste of regret. Across the counter, Mara adjusted the old poster. Her hand paused a moment on the word heart. Ethan saw it, and in that quiet moment, he knew. He was about to face the heart that had fallen asleep inside him. Night draped over the city like a sheet of gray velvet. Ethan stood by the window of his high penthouse, the lights below scattered like man-made stars. All of it glittered, perfect, expensive, and meaningless. On the opposite wall, the old poster from the building's opening day still hung. His own face in a black suit, holding a cup of coffee. Beneath it, the familiar slogan, "Serving humanity with heart." The reflection from the window glass cast those words back onto his face. He stared so long that the letters seemed to dissolve, melting into his tired eyes. In the wide room, the soft hum of the air conditioner was the only sound. Ethan sat down, took off his cap, and touched his face. His fingers were cold, skin dry, heart heavy. A voice rose in his mind, half confession, half accusation. What if success has a soul, and I sold mine? If success had a soul, had he traded his own to buy these lights? He looked around. Marble floors polished like mirrors. A cabinet filled with wines he no longer remembered. Walls covered with photos of award nights, glowing articles, and million-dollar contracts. Each frame held a fragment of past glory, and now every fragment reflected a hollow space. Outside, rain began to fall. Drops tapped against the thick glass, steady, cold. Ethan sat still, listening to the rain mix with his own breath. Each breath carried the taste of old coffee, bitter and burnt. Mara's image returned to him. Her voice, her eyes when she said, "People deserve better." She had no idea who he was, yet spoke the one truth he feared most. A stranger had seen what he'd spent his life hiding. At that same moment, across the city, Mara counted her tips. Crumpled bills folded neatly in her tired hands. She exhaled, weary but light. Beside her sat a glass jar, a small note taped to it, "For those who can't afford today." She took a $5 bill and slipped it inside. Then, I added 2 more, placing them in an envelope with careful handwriting. "Paid for your drink, come back tomorrow." A poor customer had left an empty wallet behind. She knew, but said nothing. In the penthouse, Ethan poured himself a glass of whiskey, then stopped. The image of Mara placing those small bills froze his hand mid-air. He set the glass down. The sound of crystal touching the table was soft, but enough to drain the air from the room. He looked again at the poster. The man in the picture smiled confidently, coffee cup gleaming in his hand. The real man sat here, unable to remember the last time he shared a cup with anyone, unable to tell whether coffee still brought joy or had become just another transaction. Outside the window, rain thickened. Droplets streaked the glass, blurring the city lights. Just like truth, now blurred everything he once thought was right. Ethan stood and walked to the mirror. He looked at himself, eyes bloodshot, chin trembling. His hand pressed against his chest, feeling nothing but emptiness. "Where did I lose it?" he whispered. No answer came. In a small apartment across the labor district, Mara sat by a window. The wall clock had stopped long ago. Beside her was a photo of her late husband. She smiled faintly and whispered, "Love, today I helped someone again. Just 1 cup of coffee, but maybe that was enough." The yellow light softened her face, easing the lines around her eyes. The contrast between their worlds was sharp as glass. One side, a high-rise wrapped in glass and imported wine. The other, an old room with flickering light and a kindness that never dimmed. Ethan leaned his head against the cold window. Rain slid down the outer glass, while salt burned inside his eyes. He thought of all the employees who had once bowed to him. The handshakes made in passing, the promises he never kept. How many times had he told them smile more, never realizing they smiled to hide their exhaustion? His voice trembled into the empty room. People deserve better. Mara's words, now his confession. A flash of lightning lit the poster on the wall. In that moment, serving humanity with heart shone clearly, but the reflection in the glass was warped, a reminder that his own heart had been twisted by what he built. Ethan closed his eyes, breathing deep, and for the first time in years he wasn't thinking about stocks, or profits, or reports. He was thinking about only one thing. Tomorrow, he would return to that cafe. Not to inspect his staff, but to find the piece of humanity still left inside him. The rain kept falling, 2 worlds glowing under the same light. One shining from the outside, the other lit from within. And between them stood a man who finally realized he had forgotten how to be human. The next morning, Ethan arrived earlier than usual. The air was still pale with mist, the windows fogged with a thin layer left from the night before. He stood outside, watching the warm yellow lights bloom inside, listening to the soft click of the lock, and felt as if he were about to step into another world, simpler but real. Mara was the first to open the door. She wore the same faded black uniform, hair tied back, face bare of makeup, yet something about her smile made the whole room brighter. "Morning," she said to Tom as he walked in, holding a cup of coffee from home. "Morning. I brought extra almond milk for Miss Grace." Mara smiled softly. "You remember the customers' preferences?" "Of course. They're family here." Ethan sat in the same corner, at the same table as yesterday. The black coffee tasted the same, but nothing felt the same. Every clink of a spoon, every step on the wooden floor made him feel warmer and more aware of the ache inside. He had thought he understood people, but maybe he only ever understood numbers. An hour later, the door opened again. A young woman stepped in, carrying a baby girl and holding the hand of a boy about 4 years old. Her face was tired, hair tangled, eyes rimmed dark from sleepless nights. "Morning, Grace," Mara said gently, as if she had been waiting for her. "Morning, Mara. Jake's been fussy today. I hope we're not a bother." "It's all right. Let me take this little man." She knelt, lifted the boy, and brushed her nose against his hair. "Hey, Jake, what would you like today?" "Chocolate," he said, eyes lighting up. "Chocolate for Jake, and a latte for Mom, yes?" Grace nodded, smiling for the first time that morning. Ethan watched, frozen in place. Mara wasn't just making coffee. She was brewing hope. He remembered his mother's words, "Always see the person, not the profit." Now he understood. She hadn't been talking about business strategy. She meant this. A woman using her heart to make someone feel seen again. Tom brought the hot chocolate to their table, kneeling slightly. "Here you go, Jake, but you can only drink it after your muffin, okay?" Jake nodded, eyes bright as if he'd just been handed the world. Betty was at the corner, wiping tables, softly humming along with an old song on the radio. Each touch of her cloth felt gentle, as if she were dusting off memories. Ethan breathed in deeply, a single thought echoing through him. Kindness is the currency here, and I stopped minting it long ago. Mara returned to the counter, eyes slightly tired. An older man approached, worn jacket, hands trembling as he pulled out his wallet. She took his card, swiped it through the reader, and paused. The screen flashed red, declined. The man looked down, flustered. I'm sorry. Must be a bank error. I'll pay later. Mara rested her hand lightly on the counter, her voice soft as air. It's all right. Today's coffee is on the house. He looked up, eyes wet. Thank you. I'll come back. I believe you will, she said, her smile warm enough to light the dim morning. Ethan saw everything. It was simple, but it hit him like a wave. There was no barrier here between staff and customer, giver and receiver. Only human meeting human. He noticed her quietly slip a tip bill from her pocket into the cash drawer. No one else saw it, except him. Morning light slanted through the window, tracing her face with pure clarity. Mara lowered her head, wiped the counter, and smiled faintly as she watched the man walk out. A glimmer of light touched her cheek. He couldn't tell if it was sunlight or a tear. Ethan placed a hand on his chest, feeling his heartbeat quicken. He didn't know why his throat tightened, only that it had been far too long since he'd witnessed beauty that needed no cameras, no statements, no social posts. He lowered his head and whispered, She's teaching me how to be human again. A breeze slipped through the door, carrying the scent of fresh coffee. Tom laughed as another regular entered. Mrs. Patterson, the usual? You've got a good memory, Tom. The café filled with gentle rhythm, like a small orchestra where everyone knew their part and all played in harmony. Ethan looked around, every detail suddenly alive. The chipped paint on the wall, the faded menu, the cracked plastic vase on the counter. None of it perfect, but all of it real. This wasn't a business model. It was a heartbeat, kept alive by people who knew how to love and to give. He leaned back in his chair, watching Mara return to Grace's table. Jake's asleep? She asked softly. Yes, just now. Then finish your coffee. I'll watch him for a while. Her tone was like a lullaby. Grace smiled, eyes glistening. Thank you. I don't even know what to say. Just be kind to someone else. That's enough. Ethan went still. The words were so simple, they felt like they came from another world. A world he once promised to build, and was the one who let it fade away. He looked around. Tom laughing, Betty chatting, Mara cradled the sleeping boy. The air felt full of quiet grace. And in that moment, he realized this was where his brand had truly begun. Not with money, but with a promise. The morning light softened into gold. Ethan stayed where he was, heavy-hearted, yet calm. He knew this moment would stay with him forever. Because in a world ruled by logic, he had just witnessed a miracle, a poor woman paying for someone poorer. And in that moment, he understood that not every value belongs on a balance sheet. Some only live in the eyes of those who see them, and in the hearts humble enough to begin again. The door swung open. The bell trembled like wind shaking a secret. A man stepped in, dark suit, tight tie, cold eyes. The air changed color instantly. Conversations thinned. The grinder's hum seemed to retreat. Tom glanced at Mara. Betty froze mid-wipe, cloth damp in her hand. He stood at the counter like a full stop. Charles Mitchell, regional manager. His voice was dry, hard, leaving no room for a smile. We need to talk about shrinkage. Mara set the milk pitcher down, wiped her hands on an old apron. What do you need from me, Mr. Mitchell? Her gaze was calm, but her shoulders tightened slightly. Mitchell pulled a stack of papers, flipped quickly. Your shifts, cash shortfalls, again and again. The gaps are growing. He glanced around, trying to make the cafe a witness. We consider this suspicious. No one spoke. Only a spoon clicked softly into a glass at the corner table. Ethan sat there, cap pulled low, hand tightening around his cup. The coffee smelled suddenly more bitter than on any other day. Kindness is the currency here, and I stopped minting it long ago." Mara drew a long breath. "I always balance the drawer. I always sign my closeout." She spoke slowly, clearly, not pleading. "I haven't taken a single dollar." Mitchell tapped his pen against the report. "Then where did the money go?" He paused, letting silence add weight. "How do you explain customers underpaying and still leaving with the product?" Tom took a half step forward. "Mr. Mitchell, could we keep this civil, please?" His eyes tried to shield the small flame behind the counter. Mitchell didn't look at Tom. "This isn't a kindness class. This is bookkeeping." Betty set the cloth down, her voice shaking but firm. "Mara doesn't steal. If there's missing money, it's because she helps people." Her eyes glistened, work-worn hand bracing the counter's edge. "I've seen it, many times." The cafe fell still. The silver-haired man by the window raised his head. The young mother hugged Jake tighter, looking at Mara like family. No one sipped. No one breathed hard. Mitchell's mouth twitched into a smile without warmth. "The policy has no line for kindness. Policy only counts numbers." He looked up at the price board, then down at the sheets. "Here, here, and here. Each time you accepted a shortage." Mara looked through the glass door. The streetlight fractured into drifting dust. "Some people don't have enough, but they still need a day that hurts less." Her voice was gentle, like setting a cup on a table. "I can't send them away over a single dollar when their hands are shaking." Mitchell lifted his head fully. "You're admitting you gave company product away?" He pushed the paper forward, like a sentence already signed. "That is a loss. That is a violation." Tom couldn't hold back. "I saw her pay from her own tips. Many times." He turned to the guests. "You saw it too, right?" A few slow nods. A very small yes. Betty gripped her apron, speaking through her breath. "We aren't wealthy, but we are people." Ethan swallowed the lump rising in his throat. His chest burned hot, then iced cold. He saw the pieces locked together. A system that calls optimization ethics, while optimizing the wrong thing. A man like him, sitting silent behind words on a page. A woman like her, standing upright before a machine. Mitchell set the pen down. "I'm placing you on suspension, pending investigation." He spoke fast, trying to cut off every exit. 2 weeks, maybe longer. Your time card is disabled immediately." Mara blinked, once. No tears. No begging. She set her towel on the counter, like laying down a piece of her heart. "You can suspend me." She looked straight into his eyes. "But I won't apologize for being kind." The room shivered. Tom stepped back, fists tight. Betty placed a hand on Mara's shoulder, like setting down a prayer. The young mother held Jake, eyes breaking like waves. The silver-haired man slowly stood, as if to testify. Mitchell folded his arms. "Kindness doesn't keep a company alive." He pressed each word, straight as a rule. "And you have torn the ledger." Mara shook her head slightly. "Kindness keeps people alive. People keep a company alive." She breathed in, shoulders releasing. "If helping someone costs me my job, then so be it." The sentence dropped on the floor like the last coin of the day. It rang, then went quiet. But the echo stayed a long time. Ethan closed his eyes for one beat. The English words drilled into a memory he'd abandoned. His mother's voice climbed back up a far staircase. "See the person, then the prophet." He saw the old poster blur behind Mitchell. "Serving humanity with heart." The word heart looked faded in his sight. A breathless silence. No one moved. Only the air conditioner's thin breath and coffee growing heavier in the room. A question exploded inside every chest at once. "Who will stand up for her?" Tom spoke first. "If anyone needs a signature, I'll sign as witness." His voice shook, but did not withdraw. "I have seen, I have heard, and I learned kindness from her." Betty lifted her head, tears falling without a sob. "I've worked here a long time. If this place loses her, this place will grow cold. She turned to the customers, half breaking open. Say something. Don't let silence swallow everything. A young man raised a careful hand. My card was declined once. She said it was okay. That day, I didn't give up on the rest of my day. The young mother whispered. She held my child, so I could drink one peaceful sip. An older voice by the door joined in. She slipped an extra pastry into my bag when my hands were shaking. Mitchell frowned, even his heartbeat shifted. But he clung to the papers like a man gripping a rail. Thank you, but this is not a courtroom. He looked straight at Mara. Procedure continues. Mara nodded. I understand. She unpinned her name tag, laid it down lightly. The room rippled as a small star went dark. Ethan rose halfway, then stopped. Rage clawed at his ribs. Shame wanted to shatter every polished window in his life. But he knew, if he stood now, truth would turn into theater. He had to see everything, to change everything. He sat back, but his eyes were no longer the same. Mitchell gathered the papers, voice straining for calm. You may leave now. Wait for the office notice. He stepped back, eager to drop the curtain. Mara picked up the towel, folded it neatly, the way she always folded her tired days. She turned to Tom. Take care of the guests for me. She turned to Betty. Go rest a little. I'll wipe this last table. The whole cafe moved like a dream. Some wanted to clap in protest, then didn't. Some wanted to run and hold her, but their feet felt anchored. Only Mara's voice remained, gentle enough to tear hearts. It's okay. It's all right. If helping someone costs me my job, then so be it. The line rang again, like the bell hanging over the door. Ethan stared at his hand, still gripping a cup gone cold. He understood. The storm had reached the counter, and the true heart of the brand was standing in the wind. Mitchell turned to go. The door opened. White streetlight poured in like a blunt truth. Mara looked at the old poster, serving humanity with heart, then turned away. Everything stalled. It was the final cut into the meaning of a tired phrase. Silence thickened. The cafe's heartbeat thumped like a bare drum. Someone set a glass down. The soft tap sounded like a hammer. A question hung in the air, unanswered. Who will stand up for her? Ethan drew a breath, deep enough to scrape memory. Coffee, damp cloth, a morning just torn open. He lifted the edge of his cap, not to reveal himself, but to reveal a decision. The storm wasn't over, but the wind inside his chest had changed, and everyone felt it. Something was about to happen. Something bigger than policy, bigger than the ledger, bigger than this room, heavy with too much silence. Mara walked toward the door, not fast, not slow. She didn't bow her head. She only held her back straight, the way you stand when storms arrive. Tom touched the counter's edge, eyes bright with tears. Betty murmured a prayer in a rough, hushed voice. The invisible audience of this story was the whole cafe. Everyone knew some days redefine us. Today was one of those days. And then silence fell again. Thicker, heavier. A question burst inside every chest. Who will stand up for her, right now? The scrape of a chair sliced through the silence like a blade. That simple sound made everyone turn. Ethan stood up, slowly. Every movement carried the weight of a storm reaching its calm center. He took off his cap. The stranger disappeared. Only Ethan Cole remained, founder and head of Hart Hearth Coffee. No one breathed. No one spoke. Only the espresso machine hissed behind them, each puff of steam like the cafe's heartbeat restarting after suffocation. Mitchell froze, his face drained of color. He stood caught between two worlds. Mr. Cole? His voice cracked through the stunned whispers. Mara stared, eyes wide, unable to believe what she saw. She stepped back half a pace, as if afraid she was dreaming. Ethan looked straight at Mitchell. His voice was low, steady, each word dropping like stone on tile. You called compassion theft. You just fired the heart of this company." The sentence shattered the silence. No one moved. Mitchell forced a thin smile, searching for escape. "Sir, I was following protocol." The numbers didn't add up. Ethan cut him off. His tone wasn't loud, but it froze the room. "What protocol teaches you to punish kindness? What policy lets you humiliate humanity with a spreadsheet?" Mara bowed her head, tears falling before she could stop them. Tom stood still, hand gripping the counter's edge. Betty pressed her palm to her chest, whispering a prayer that had finally been heard. Ethan walked slowly toward the counter. Light from the doorway drew a bright path across the floor. He no longer looked at Mitchell. He looked at Mara. His gaze softened, an unspoken apology. 3 days ago, I sat at that table," he said quietly, pointing to the familiar corner. "I saw you make coffee. I saw you help people. I saw you pay for those who couldn't. And I saw my company forget how to be human." Mitchell tried to speak. "Sir, I didn't know." "You didn't know because you didn't look," Ethan said, not turning. "You counted money and lost the soul that made it worth anything." The air thickened, heavy enough that every breath sounded loud. Ethan stopped a step from Mitchell. Only an arm's length apart, yet separated by 2 worlds. "You think you keep this company alive by cutting kindness. But today, I'll keep it alive by cutting you." Mitchell's face drained, eyes darting for help. No one moved. No one stood with the man who had kept this place silent too long. "Charles Mitchell," Ethan said, voice calm as a verdict already written. "You're terminated. Effective immediately." The cafe held its breath. Mitchell's mouth opened. No words came. His expression shifted from anger to fear to emptiness. "Sir, you can't." Ethan stepped back slightly, eyes cold and certain. "I just did." Silence fell again, long as a lifetime. No voices, no machines, only the sound of hearts pounding in the room. Mara stood still. Light traced her tear-streaked face. One warm drop fell. It wasn't from fear, but from relief. Because at last, someone had spoken what she never dared hope to hear. Ethan looked at her, his voice softening, almost like confession. "I forgot the meaning of the slogan I wrote myself. Serving humanity with heart, it was never meant for cups. It was meant for people like you, who keep this place alive." Mara shook her head gently, voice trembling. "I only did what I thought was right, sir." Ethan replied slowly, clearly. "And, because of that, you did what I couldn't." A small ripple of clapping began, then grew, spreading through the cafe like a tide. Tom nodded, tears streaking his cheeks. Betty rested her hand on Mara's shoulder, whispering something that made her laugh through her tears. Mitchell backed toward the door, carrying his own shadow out with him. No one stopped him. No one hated him. Only silence remained, gentle but firm. Ethan watched him leave, then turned to everyone. "From today, Hart and Hearth will be led by heart, not fear. No more rules that punish kindness. No more numbers that hide compassion." Mara covered her mouth, tears spilling, but her smile breaking through. Customers began to rise, one by one, each touching her shoulder as they passed. No words needed, only glances. Gratitude moved quietly across the room. Light slanted through the window, washing over Mara's face. She looked at Ethan, voice trembling but warm. "Thank you for listening." Ethan nodded gently. "No, thank you for helping me see again." The cafe exhaled after the storm. Cups clinked softly. The smell of coffee drifted like a small prayer. And at the center of it all, a woman stood in the light who had just lost her job and saved the soul of an entire company. The phone vibrated softly in Ethan's hand. He dialed right there, voice calm and decisive. "Legal, it's Ethan. Draft a new policy, effective immediately. Compassion first. Each cafe may help struggling guests with free items, record it transparently, and no one gets punished for kindness. The whole room held its breath for a few seconds. Then applause rolled through like a warm wave. Someone laughed through tears. Someone let out a small cheer. The air changed color, as if someone had opened the door and let light in. Tom slapped the counter, eyes bright with red. Betty pressed a hand to her heart, exhaling a long breath. Guests rose to their feet, touching one another's shoulders as if passing good news along. Mara did not move. She looked at Ethan, eyes wet, but her smile stayed gentle. "You don't owe me anything." The words fell as lightly as the first rain. Ethan shook his head, lips tightening with emotion. "You reminded me I owe people everything." Applause rose again. But this time, slower, deeper, like the rhythm of a prayer. The smell of coffee spread, no fear left in it. Only the soft aftertaste of the right thing is finally called by its name. A guest stepped forward, a silver-haired man holding an old hat. "My daughter has been job hunting for months. She sits here every afternoon. Thank you for not making her feel ashamed." Mara smiled and nodded in place of an answer. Ethan bowed his head, grateful, as if receiving a blessing. A young mother pushed the door in, carrying baby Grace and holding Jake's hand. Both children looked around, surprised that the applause had not fully faded. Mara knelt to meet Jake's eyes. "What would you like today? Hot chocolate?" He nodded, a small smile dawning like a sunbeam. Ethan watched and felt his chest loosen another notch. He turned to everyone. "From now on, kindness is policy, not exception. We record to learn, not to count sins. Every gifted cup is a promise kept." Betty asked softly. "What if someone takes advantage, dear?" Ethan smiled. "A few might try, but most people just need to be seen and believed. We would rather lose a little money than lose our heart." Mara wiped the edge of her lashes. She looked at the old poster on the wall, the familiar words still glowing faintly. "Serving humanity with heart." Her gaze returned, meeting Ethan's, like touching a mirror newly wiped clean. "My husband used to say, 'Look for the good in ordinary moments.'" Her voice was small, but clear, like lighting a lamp in a dark kitchen. The sentence lingered in the air. Ethan chuckled softly through wet lashes. A smile caught between ache and gratitude. He was right, and I wandered very far from that. A short silence. The kind that makes a spoon touching glass sound honest. Then someone started another round of applause. This time it sounded like affirmation, like they had chosen a path together. Ethan turned back to the counter. "Tom, starting tomorrow, add a new line. Community care. Every free cup, every extra pastry. Write it down so we can retell it to each other. Tell it so we remember why we exist." Tom nodded, young hand gripping the pen like a new flag. "Mara," Ethan said softly, "if you agree, help me train every store on compassion first. Not how to give, but how to see. Not how to hand out, but how to listen." Mara hesitated, then smiled, like a flower opening after rain. "If I'm allowed to see people, I'll do it." "You will be allowed to see, and you will be trusted," Ethan said, his voice warming. A shy young man stepped forward. "Sir, my card was declined the other day. She paid for me. I applied for an internship. I came to say thank you." Ethan placed a hand on his shoulder. "Congratulations, and thank you for giving us the chance to be kind." By the window, sunlight slid across worn wood grain. Chipped tables suddenly looked like witnesses to a new charter. No one checked the time as often as before. They looked at one another more. They called each other by name more. Ethan drew a deep breath. "One more thing. From now on, each week, I will sit in one café as an ordinary guest. Not to inspect, but to listen. Not to grade, but to relearn how to care." A few people laughed softly. An elderly woman cupped her tea and spoke loudly enough for the next table to hear. "Sounds like you're coming home, child." Ethan bowed his head. "Yes, I'm coming home." Mara stepped closer, voice slow and steady. "I don't need praise, only that no one is afraid to be good." Ethan looked at her, speaking like a promise made in a family photo. Here, kindness will no longer be treated as a fault. Guests began sharing their stories, small pieces like seeds. One spoke about losing a job and the first free cup of coffee. One spoke about a long night at the hospital and the extra pastry slipped into a bag. One spoke about the first time someone remembered their name. The stories circled the room, touching and making every eye shine. Ethan pressed his hands together at his chest, not as a ritual, but to keep his heart from overflowing. We have measured wrong for too long. Starting today, Hart and Hearth's metric is the number of warm moments. The number of people is less lonely when they leave. The number of real smiles, not the ones forced by procedure. Mara listened, her eyes seeming to brighten by one beat. She continued, voice low and even, as if reading a well-worn page of her diary. When he was alive, every evening he asked me, "What good did you see today?" I would say, a nod, a late thank you, a hand holding the door. He would smile and say, then the day was not wasted. Ethan laughed through tears, a short sound that traveled far inside other hearts. Then today certainly isn't wasted. Tom brought out a small tray. Refills for the firekeepers, he said, looking at Mara as if at a teacher. Betty set a chalkboard on the counter. She wrote slowly, careful strokes, compassion first. Below it she drew a small heart, then a small roof sheltering the heart. The café chuckled, not loud, but warm as a thin blanket. Ethan dialed legal again. One more thing, mandatory training on listening hours. Each shift, 15 minutes dedicated to just listening, to coworkers, to guests, to oneself. Do not let anyone leave here without being heard by someone. On the other end, the lawyer answered quickly. Yes, sir. I'll send the draft right away. Ethan closed the phone and looked around the room, as if to memorize every face in this light. Mara stepped half a pace, then stopped. Mr. Ethan. Call me Ethan, he smiled. She nodded. Ethan, thank you for giving meaning back to a poster. He looked at the wall, where old words felt new again. Not me. You and everyone here kept it alive. A little girl tugged her mother's hand, whispering loud enough for all to hear. Mom, this place is kind. Her mother nodded, lips shaping a thank you too full to speak. Ethan turned away, brushed his eyes quickly, then turned back with a steadied smile. Tomorrow, tell me more of those ordinary good things. Mara smiled. I'll start counting again, but I'll count the moments between people. The espresso machine sighed softly, like relief. The glass door reflected more faces, and more eyes meeting one another. A new chapter opened with no ceremony. Only with one policy, and countless hearts. Ethan stood in the center, speaking just loud enough to carry. Thank you for helping me relearn an old lesson. If success has a soul, that soul is called compassion. Mara nodded, whispering as if to someone already gone. Look for the good in ordinary moments. She looked at Ethan. And keep it here. Outside, the sun shifted. Inside, stories kept glowing like coals in a kitchen stove. No one hurried to leave. They stayed, just to be together. And at the center of the room, the meaning of the word home finally found its way back. 6 months later, morning on that corner glowed like pale honey. The old sign was gone. In its place, warm wood carved clearly, the home café. A place once ordinary, now a home for many hearts. The coffee smelled the same, but something was different. Not just aroma, but the feeling of being welcomed. Each table shone, each photo on the wall told a story. Pictures of guests who were helped, blue ink notes reading, "Thank you for seeing me when no one else did." The wall felt like a collective portrait of kindness. Mara stepped from the back, white shirt now, a new name tag, Regional Community Coordinator. Her hair was tied high as before, her smile still gentle. Only now her eyes carried more faith. Faith that small things, when nurtured, travel farther than money or fame. Tom stood at the bar, collar neat, posture sure. On his chest, a small line read, "Assistant Manager." He called orders while humming an old tune, laughter woven through the grinder's steady sound. "Coffee for Grace, extra chocolate for Jake." "You remember so well," Mara said, eyes bright. Tom flashed a playful smile. "I remember everyone who was helped. They're the reason we're here." In the far corner, Betty still wiped tables like a small ritual. Her white cloth moved slowly, evenly. She looked up. Light through the window washed a chalkboard phrase, "Compassion, first, always." She smiled, kind and proud, like a mother watching children grow. The door opened. A soft bell chimed. The young mother entered, holding Jake's hand, baby girl asleep in her arms. Mara recognized them at once and stepped forward. "Hello, Grace. It's been a while." Grace smiled, setting a bag on the chair. "You'll never guess what I brought today." "Good news?" "Very good news." She pulled out a carefully folded paper. "My promotion letter. I'm officially a department manager." Mara's eyes widened, then she laughed. "Congratulations. That's wonderful." Grace nodded, her voice faintly shaking. "Remember? I practiced interviews here. You sat across from me and asked real questions." "Yes, and I told you to look the interviewer in the eye, not down." "And I did, because I remembered your line. Believe you deserve that seat." Jake laughed loudly, raising the small cup of chocolate Tom had just delivered. "I remember, Miss Mara. You gave me extra cake." The cafe burst into small laughter, tiny sounds stitching a song of happiness. Ethan sat at his usual table, the old window corner. Shirt sleeves rolled. No security, no assistant. Only a black coffee and an open notebook on the table. He watched quietly, eyes soft and far away. A young staffer set down a fresh cup and smiled. "Would you like some sugar, sir?" Ethan shook his head lightly. "No. Coffee tastes like purpose now." He sipped. The old bitterness remained, but a new sweetness followed. It wasn't sugar. It meant. Mara passed by, paused beside his table. "Same table?" "Yeah, this spot lets me see things clearer." "Clearer about what?" Ethan smiled, voice low. "Clear that I didn't save the company. It was saved by people who kept believing in kindness, even when I forgot." She sat, sunlight pooling across their faces like a blessing. "People ask me why we changed the name," Mara said, glancing at the home cafe sign. "I tell them this isn't just a place to buy coffee, it's a place to come home." Ethan nodded, eyes glistening. "Exactly. Home isn't an address. It's being understood, forgiven, seen." On the wall near the counter hung a large map of the United States, thick with red pins. Each pin marked a store that adopted compassion first. Beneath each pin, a small printed photo, staff faces, guests, handwritten thank you notes. A girl wrote, "My grandma cried when they gave her a birthday pastry." An old man wrote, "Thank you for asking if I was okay. First time in years." Ethan looked up at the map, warmth rising like a quiet tide. This was the work of those who believed. Not strategy, faith in people. Betty passed by and rested a hand on his shoulder. "You know, yesterday I got a letter from another store. They wrote about a homeless guest given coffee, who came back to ask for a job." Ethan smiled. "Let it spread, Betty. Like fire rekindled in every cup." Mara looked around, her gaze landing on a new photo she'd added that morning. Her husband, gentle smile, a cup in his hand. She had written beneath it, "Look for the good in ordinary moments." The phrase had become a credo, a reminder for everyone. Ethan read the line and spoke softly. "He's probably very proud." Mara nodded, eyes wet. "Probably, and surely smiling." Outside, Jake ran around the chairs, laughter ringing like tiny bells. Grace sat still, watching her son, then looked toward the chalkboard. She snapped a photo, sent it with a caption, "Kindness built this place." Ethan stayed a while longer, watching morning light sketch a heart on the tabletop. He opened his notebook and wrote the final line of the monthly report. No KPI can measure what we feel today. He closed it, drew a deep breath, and spoke like a breeze. Sometimes, the only way to find success again is to remember how to be human. Mara smiled. And hold on to ordinary things, as if they were extraordinary. Light poured into the cafe, spilling into every small corner. Betty hung a new photo. Tom set a tray of fresh pastries on the counter, butter mingling with coffee. Mara opened the door, greeting the day's first guest with bright energy. Welcome to the home cafe, where everyone has a seat. The words carried out, gentle and clear, like the greeting of a world being healed. In the corner, Ethan took his last sip, looked through the glass, where sunlight was rewriting everything. He smiled, whispering to himself, "Coffee tastes like purpose now, and home never felt this real." The afternoon faded gently, golden light slipping through the cafe window, resting on Mara and Ethan's faces like warm velvet. No one spoke. They simply sat there, watching the cafe settle after a long day. Children's laughter drifted away with the wind. Betty folded her cloth. Tom switched off the grinder. The smell of coffee softened, leaving behind the sweet trace of fresh pastry. Ethan looked at Mara, his voice low, almost a whisper. "Do you hear it? The cafe is breathing." Mara smiled, nodding softly. "I do. It's peaceful, like a heart finally fixed." Light touched the sign outside. The home cafe reflected in their eyes, trembling in the sunset glow. Ethan inhaled, speaking slowly, as if carving each word into memory. 3 words rebuilt a company's soul. People feel at home here. A quiet pause followed. Soft, long, enough for anyone listening to believe that miracles can begin with small things. Mara looked out the window, the last sunlight breaking across the table. Maybe it only takes a cup of coffee, a listener, and 3 words at the right time. Ethan nodded, gaze distant yet warm. Those 3 words saved me. The narrator's tone lowered, calm as twilight. If you too believe that kindness can change the way people work, share this story and keep that flame alive in your heart. If you believe kindness can change business, like, share, and subscribe to keep this story alive. The final ray dissolved into the street, leaving only the soft sound of a spoon tapping glass. Maybe we all have a place like the home cafe inside us. A small corner where kindness never goes out of style. It only needs to be remembered. Tomorrow, when you step into your office, your classroom, or your favorite morning spot, pause for a moment. Ask someone a simple question. Are you okay? That question alone could be the first cup of compassion. Because every organization, no matter how big, only lasts as long as its humanity stays warm. If this story made you believe that kindness can transform the way we work, leave a little heart, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe. So together we can keep these stories of goodness alive. Because sometimes 3 words at the right time are enough to start something eternal. Mara looked at Ethan and whispered, "If anyone asks, I'll tell them, you kept your promise."